All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we're going to talk about what Micah Parsons had to say. He talked about some suggestions for the Cowboys here in the offseason. So, a couple things. So he talked about the need for bigger players on the defensive side, mentioning the importance of adding a large interior lineman to stop the run. He talked about Chris Jones, a Chris Jones-like player. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be Chris Jones, but again, that's something he talked about. The other thing, too, is adding strong linebackers. And he talked about the Ravens with Roquan Smith. He talked about the 49ers with Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw. That was another thing, too. I mean, again, you look at the Cowboys' defense, and, they got great players, including him on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, you got DeMarcus Lawrence as well. And Deron Bland had a good season with his interceptions, his pick sixes. Obviously, they were missing Trayvon Diggs this year. But yeah, I mean, listen, the defense is opportunistic. They could turn the ball over, and it's just in the playoffs against the Packers, things fell apart. And the linebacking core, you had Leighton Vander Esch, the Wolf Hunter, as he was called for a while, but obviously injuries kind of derailed his career. And listen, he talks about two teams that were the Final Four teams this year, the Ravens with their linebacking core led by Roquan Smith, who they brought over from the Bears, which was a solid trade for them. And then, of course, the 49ers, who do a great job at drafting, Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw. That's a defense that needs to improve, the Cowboys. Because, again, especially against the Packers. I mean, guys were running wide open. It just was a disaster. And we'll see what Mike Zimmer now brings, taking over as a defensive coordinator, with Dan Quinn leaving to go coach in Washington. But, yeah, I mean, listen, you got that. But then he also talked about as well on the offensive side of the ball. He also brought up, Tony Pollard, and trying to improve this running game, keeping Pollard. But also, again, you got to bring in someone to pair with him because, that worked really well in 2022 with him and Ezekiel Elliott, a good 1-2 combination. That's something that I think they were definitely missing from their offense. And, they didn't really run the ball against the Packers, well, also because they were playing from behind so much. But, again, I've said this numerous times, I think a lot of us can agree that it's because of Pollard coming off of the injury in the playoff game against the 49ers. Well, let's see how he is the following season. Because he was one of the more explosive running backs in the league before he got hurt. Then he gets hurt in the playoffs against the Niners, and yeah, this year it looked like he kind of lost a step. But again, that could be just him trying to build himself back up from the injury that he suffered. And I talked about this in the last segment, that Derrick Henry has kind of been a name that's been floated around maybe as a guy that could end up in Dallas. I mean, you got Derrick Henry and Tony Pollard. That would be a nice combination. Those two guys. Derrick Henry then doesn't have to be the 3-down back. I mean, you work them both into the offense, and I think that could work. And Pollard's the more of a receiving back as opposed to Derrick Henry, but I think that could maybe work. But and also, how about I didn't watch it, but how about Micah Parsons' performance in the celebrity All-Star game with All-Star Weekend for the NBA? I think he was the MVP, right? He had 37 points. Yeah. He's an athlete. And I know he's gotten some criticism because he kind of disappeared in the playoff game against the Packers, but he's a very good player. And I kind of wish I do wish that the Giants had him, because I think they were close to getting him, but yeah. So I mean, I understand what he's saying. I mean, look, it's easier said than done when it comes to his suggestions on the defensive side of the ball. I think bringing in another running back to go along with Pollard is also a good idea as well. But again, the Cowboys got to go out there and we'll see what they end up doing. But one of the things I'll say though is you also need to improve when it comes to coaching and also the quarterback position, because again, Dak Prescott has this great season, but ends up coming up short in the playoffs once again. And Mike McCarthy, it looked like the team just was not prepared. Cowboys have only won one playoff game with him as the head coach, and it was against a Bucs team that was not that good in Brady's last year. So, listen, the Cowboys can add, whoever they want, but ultimately, it also has to come down to the coaching as well. And your quarterback's got to show up in big moments. Now, the conference, again, is going to be better next year. I mean, I don't have to go through it, but I've gone through it several times since, the Cowboys got eliminated. This conference is going to be better. And this was your one chance to maybe get to the NFC Championship game, get another crack at the 49ers, and see what happens. I know they got destroyed in, week 4 or week 5? They played in the regular season. But the playoff game was close. And playoffs are different. They are different. So, who's to say they couldn't have played a close game against the 49ers? And look at how the 49ers played against the Lions and the Packers. Who's to say the Cowboys couldn't have done that? They have the talent for it. But, again, they didn't get there. So, it's... For me, I don't know what they can do that is really going to... I mean, again, they finished 12-5 this year. They won the division. This is a weak NFC, and they lost to the Packers, who many people thought were, this is a, rebuild mode. Well, yeah. I mean, we didn't expect them to get this far, and they did, and they almost made it to the NFC Championship game. So now they're going to be better next year. It's just, I mean, you look at the division. I mean, the Eagles, they fell apart, but I think the Eagles are going to be back to, being a good team next year. It's just, between the coordinators, Super Bowl hangover, I think, it's just, I don't know. I don't know what happened there, but, yeah, everything changed after they lost to the 49ers. So, that's your competition right now is the Eagles for the division, because the Commanders, they got a lot of stuff to figure out. Well, I think the Giants have the most to figure out of anybody in the division, but I think there might just be a little bit of Giants bias. But because at least with the Commanders, they have a top pick, so they're going to take a quarterback. With the Giants, they have so many other issues besides the quarterback position. They don't really have wide receivers. At least with the Commanders, you could say, oh, well, they have Terry McLaurin, as a number one, even though I remember the quote he said. He's like, oh, at least I was running cardio for one of the games because he just was not getting the ball. Listen, I'd take Terry McLaurin. But yeah, and then the Giants with their issues, quarterback, offensive line, running back, it's just that there's so many issues with the Giants. But yeah, for the Cowboys, Eagles are competition for the division. But then, the conference, again, is going to be better. So, I think really the fact that they kept Mike McCarthy, yeah, I don't think is the right thing to do. Because you're in the same position you've been every single year he's been the coach. Now, again, you go back to Jason Garrett. How many chances did Jason Garrett get? There were many times where, after going 8-8, 8-8, 8-8, 3 years in a row, that should have been it for him. But then the following year, they had a good season with Romo. DeMarco Murray leads the league in rushing, so he sticks around. Then Romo gets hurt the following year. Then 2016, Romo gets hurt, but then they have Dak and Zeke, and then they're the 1 seed. And then 2017, they just missed the playoffs. 2018, they make the playoffs. They win a playoff game, but then they lose in the second round. 2019, that ended up being the final straw there. Because they missed the playoffs. And then Mike McCarthy takes over, and again, first year, Dak gets hurt, has that horrific injury. Then the following season, Dak comes back, they make the playoffs, they lose to the 49ers in the first round. Then the following year, lose to the 49ers again in the second round. And then This year, losing the first round. So it's just the Cowboys are in the same position they've been in for years. They just cannot get past the divisional round. They didn't even make it out of the first round. So, and they have all this talent. No matter what they do, what players they add, it's ultimately going to come down to the coach. And I just think with Mike McCarthy, they're going to end up in the same position next year. So I think you got to that needs to be something that had to be changed, and they're not going to change that. So it's going to be it might be another wasted year for them. And again, with Dak Prescott, I think Dak Prescott is a solid quarterback. Definitely is better than how he first started out, because now it's kind of become his team. Because again, he stepped into a great situation, top offensive line, prime Zeke, his rookie season. You had Dez Bryant, Jason Witten, Cole Beasley, Terrence Williams. These are throwbacks. Again, Cowboys come up on Immaculate Grid, and you could put one of those guys. Terrence Williams is a throwback. But yeah, and then as the years went on, it kind of morphed into Dak's team. And, again, Dak's put up good numbers, but ultimately you get to the postseason and he comes up short. And who does that remind you of? Tony Romo. That was Tony Romo too. It's just, I don't know. I'm not really expecting a whole lot from the Cowboys next year. I'm expecting them to be good, be a good regular season team, but to get to the playoffs, that's when they really got to show you what they're made of. And listen, I had them going to the NFC Championship game because I just thought, they should make it, number 2 seed. Conference isn't loaded like it has been in years past. They still couldn't do it. So next year, listen, they could be the 1 seed next year. You got to show me that you could get to, the next step. And for my whole life, they have not been able to do that. Especially since I started watching football. So, and they have had some great teams. Very good teams. When the Giants went on their first Super Bowl run with Eli Manning, the Cowboys were really good that year. Cowboys beat them twice, but it was that third time Giants beat them. You had the year, like I said, the year with DeMarco Murray, Zeke's rookie season, Zeke and Dak's rookie season. Those teams were good, but they just could not get past the divisional round. And those 2 losses came against, Aaron Rodgers. So it just, I don't know. But listen, Micah Parsons, again, I understand what he's saying. And, I think, the running game is something to improve on. The defense, you want to add some better personnel there. Linebacking core. Of course, nothing he said was wrong. But I think ultimately what's going to hold them back is their head coach and their quarterback. So, that's really my thoughts on that. Again, Dak Prescott, I think, is a solid quarterback, but it's just he has not, in the playoffs lately, he just does not perform. So we're going to continue talking about quarterbacks, actually. So when we come back from our final break of the show, we're going to talk about the Steelers quarterback situation. It's something I have talked about before, but a couple of things I was reading last night I just wanted to touch upon and give you my thoughts. And that is what we'll do when we come back from our final break of the show. So, with that being said, stick around and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.